Hello, Waswere here, back with another video, and today we're doing something special. This is going to be my first ever bank video on the channel. I've had a lot of people request for me to do this, so I thought why not do this right before Orphan comes out. So I did spend a little bit of time organizing my bank this morning, so it's not exactly what it always looks like. Usually this infinity tab is quite a bit larger, as I just dump a lot of junk in there and then move it around every month or so. But the first top left item that I want to talk about is probably the most important one, and I'm not even going to hover over it too much because I'm afraid of removing that placeholder. But I owned a yellow party hat from about mid 2017 up until the fall of last year, so about a year ago now. And I had sold the yellow party hat for two reasons. First of all, the minimal maxing account, I didn't want to take away from my main cash stack that I was saving up for archaeology. So I needed a relatively large float. And the second reason was because I felt like archaeology was going to take 10 or so bill and the hat was worth 8.5 bill at the time. As a whole, I don't know if I regret it. My rank 41 is kind of untaken and weighable for the next 5 years, but I probably will never get to the point where I'll be able to own a party hat again. So I leave this reminder in the top left corner as memories for when I owned it. The rest of this infinity tab, there's not much to talk about. It's just a lot of junk that I don't want to destroy, but I also don't ever use. The only thing to note here is the Wrath XP boost scroll. If there ever becomes a skill where I am not 200 mil by the time the embargo comes over, I can use this scroll to get 10% more XP in that skill, but I highly doubt that that will ever happen. The second tab, or I guess it's the first tab because the infinity tab doesn't count, is my farming tab. And I haven't touched farming in quite a while, but this is just all the animals I can sell that I don't really need anymore. All the mush, the food, the seeds. I used to have a stack of unchecked animals in here, but I've sold those off for GP because I don't need them anymore because I'm 200 mil farming. I'm slowly working my way towards getting all the breeds done, but that's going to be a long way off as I seem to do a month or two really hardcore checking every day or 2 or 3 times a day, and then I go 6 months without checking it at all. But I think right now, out of the 180 or so animals, I'm at about 130 already done. So I'm not too far off, and I made good progress on my last sprint through it. The next tab is kind of a remnant of an old tab. This was my agility tab that I had set up. It had used to have Silverhawk feathers, Silverhawk boots. This augmented crystal dagger is special for Anachronia agility, as I wanted to have mobile on a main hand, and usually I have mobile on an offhand. But I wanted to have it on the main hand so I could have Ys on the offhand. I have 54 leftover codex pages, and one day I might actually go finish off another codex, maybe make another video on it. These are untradeable items that I don't want to destroy, so stuff like all my clue scrolls, which I never do, these corrupted ore, which is 142k that I mined, this hermit crab pet, all my void in case it eventually becomes useless. This is just the don't destroy tab, but don't really use, except for the beeswax just stores in here because you don't really need to interact with it at all. Next up is the treasure hunter tab. This is primarily, not fully, but items you gain from treasure hunter and or related items, and these are things that I guess I might as well not destroy and just stock up on, even though I don't really need them. These monthly D&D tokens don't actually get me any more experience, but I can use those to do the oyster toy so we can get a little more GP out of it, or if there's a new quest that requires planks, I can use protean planks and all that sort of stuff. I can use this for testing out new methods and bringing videos to you guys, even though I don't actually need to use them. So this is the tab that probably changed the most this morning, but it's my herblore tab, and it's kind of organized how I like it. So at the first row is kind of all my food here, then all my incense sticks, and then the overload supplies. We have 13,000 4-dose overload, so I don't think I'll ever run out, because if you assume that each one of those gets converted into a 6-dose, that's 36 minutes for each one. So for every 10, you get 6 hours. So we're looking at about 8,000 hours worth of PVMing with overloads up all the time. And I seem to always forget to re-overload, so it's more like 6.5 minutes per. Then I move into the consumable potions. We have our brews, our restores, and our power bursts of feats. Some people will have Guthix Rests in here and Blue Blubber Jellies, but I don't primarily use them as much, as I like to keep myself to 2 Keybinds, and Rock Brew, or Sailfish Brew that it is now, is enough for my brain to comprehend. And these Super Sarah Brews I only ever use on like boss releases, or if there's some really hard challenge that I really need that extra healing. I know, like, I think the last time I used this was 100, my first ever 100% Telos kill was the last time I ever used Super Sarah Brews, so it's been a while. Next up, we have the overload section, and I have them kind of in order of like most power to least power. So we have our aggro overloads for AFKing, which will soon be wholly aggro overloads with the new Orphan update. Then we'll have our Supreme Overloads, which I don't really use anymore, but they're just kind of like as a storage buffer. Then we have our Elder Overloads, which I use whenever I don't need the Salve help. And then finally, we have the Salve help, which I use at A, bosses where inventory space are an issue, so something like Solak, and B, places where I need anti-fire protection, so like ED2. So I would say Solak and ED2 are the main place where I use salves. And then when I don't use salves and I use regular Elder Overloads, I have these Super Prayer Renewals that I also use with them. So for the Brightfires, I use those with Elder Overloads when I don't want to waste salves. So say if I was doing something like Iron Dragons on Slayer, I would just use a Brightfire potion with maybe an aggro overload to ensure that I'm getting my anti-fire protection. These are basically a prayer renewal and a super anti-fire combined together. Then we have our spiritual prayers, so when I'm spamming out those rippers, I make sure to use those potions. And we have the weapon poisons and anti-poisons. The 1 doses are for Solak, the 3 doses are for everything else, and then the anti-poison is for Araxor. Next up is the magic tab. We basically have every rune in our stack of them, and then all the 4 staffs as well. So if we're going to be alching a lot, we can just grab a Mystic Fire Staff and equip it. These were all from clues from the Oyster, and I just thought might as well keep it. So this is probably the tab that you're most looking forward to. It has the Slayer icon, but it's my PVM tab. So it's all my items that I use when PVMing. Just from start to finish, it gets pretty intense. We have our melee gear with all our weapons. There's so many melee weapons. The only thing we're really missing right now is upgrading this offhand Drygor Mace to the offhand Khopesh. It's just offhand weapons do so little, especially the jump from T92 to T90 is so minimal that you're only losing out on like maybe 1k DPM as a difference between the two. So it's not something that's a high priority, and I'd rather spend my GP on video ideas or stuff like getting these 30 Tetra Compasses for Orphan, and basically it's a low priority item, and as long as I have my massive Bossman loot tab not sold, I won't be upgrading to the T92 offhand for pretty much any style that I don't already have. So then we have our ZGS, which is our main 2-hand weapon. Then we have our Spear, which we use for bleeds, dismember, blood tendrils, and slaughter. So really good PVMing ability there because of the duration of bleeds are 50% higher. So your dismember actually hits 10 times if you have lunging 4, which means that if, say, your dismember does 800 a hit, that means you just used an 8k basic, which is insane. Then we have our Scythe for Slayer and or mob clearing. I put both Genocidal and Ruthless 3 on there just to make sure that we got the most we could out of it. Then in terms of melee armor, we have Masterwork, Trim Masterwork, Acto, and Bandos. So the Masterwork kind of just sits in the bank now. I just need to get the perks off of them and then use it on the custom fit Trim Masterwork. So that way I can repair it. I'm just kind of waiting for this custom fit Trim Masterwork to get down to 0% again. And then when it's 0%, I'll de-augment the Masterwork and use it to repair. The Acto, I had originally augmented this for early Bossman videos for Grigorovich with getting biting 2 Venom Blood and using it instead of the Masterwork Plate Buddy. But I now know that that's a massive mistake because You can just use Irid incense sticks, and then you don't necessarily need the extra armor that the Acto gives, so I should de-augment this. And then the Bandos is the final one, and I use this for demon slaying when the monster is low level, just so I can get that Demon Slayer perk. I also have Dragon Slayer on there, but I don't really kill dragons with melee, as I primarily do that with major range. Then we have our hammer for that insane DPS. When this gets down to a 0% hammer, I'm going to, instead of buying a new hammer, adding it to a different essence of finality, so that way I have unlimited Statius Warhammer specs. I'm just kind of waiting for it to get to 0. As for now, I can just use the hammer. And then moving on to range, we're pretty geared up with range. We have 3 of the 4 T92s with Eldritch, SGB, and the Blightbound crossbow. The only one we're missing is the offhand. And as kind of mentioned with melee, we're not going to upgrade this. Our range armor is kind of outdated here, but our main one that we use is Pernix, which we perked out and got up to level 20. And then same with the Acto, it kind of sits there, but we don't use. And then for planted feet, we have our Sun Spear, and then we have a Dark Bow for aftershock shielding if we need to. That's kind of when we're maining the SGB, we use the Dark Bow as our shield, and then when we're mating the Eldritch, we'll use a augmented Blightbound crossbow and the Vengeful Kite shield as our shield. The final style, Mage, is kind of my baby. This is the style I use the most of, and despite the fact that I don't Fortic, I think I'm actually kind of okay at it. And with that in mind, I geared up a lot with this style. So I have T90s, first of all, which are my switch weapons. So I have the Seismic 1 for planted feet to extend our sunshine. I have the Seismic Sing for flanking. And then I have T92 dual wield. Of the places that I want to mage and the Inquisitor's Staff doesn't work, it's pretty much only elite dungeons. So that means that I'm going to be able to stack up these Ruthless stacks on the mobs, making the mob clearing process so much quicker. And the Equilibrium 4 still brings a lot of extra damage on the boss. Now, where the Inquisitor's Staff does work, it's our main weapons. We made sure to get Aftershock 4, Equilibrium 2, and there's a Precise 6 on there. We could go for P6 R1, but most of the places we go, that R1 won't be helping us out that much. And then as a holdover from Telos, we actually have 2 shields. We have the Merciless Kite Shield with Turtling 4 for longer cades. And then for the Arcane, we have Absorbative 4. This is used for tanking really big hits. So if I mess up the so much power at Telos, I'm tanking a big like 12k hit. So this knocks that down to like 8k, which is much more manageable and makes it so I don't die as often and lose those streaks. And then we also have our Acto augmented quite well. This is a bit of a holdover from when I used to Telos with tank armor before we got this like absolute amount of power creep with archaeology, where you can kind of brainlessly go through the motions and do the 200k damage without even really worrying about it, especially now that I own an SGB, which I never did before. So that's again 30k free damage on the final phase. It's just so much easier to do that final phase that this Acto is kind of no longer needed, but I keep it around because it's nice to wear for your first couple tries at a boss. Especially with the new boss coming out in December, I'll probably start out with Acto for the first couple tries, just camp a shield, see how long I can survive, and then worry about DPS later, and that's when I'll switch over to the Augmented Elite Tectonic. Our summoning tab is pretty basic. I have all the familiars I would use. The Ripper Demons are probably the biggest expense of all of these. I've moved over to using Pack Mammoths and don't really use Pack Yaks anymore because the cost difference is like 15k. It's 10k. It's like 4k versus 15k. So you're paying 10k extra per hour in order to get 2 more inventory slots. I think that's definitely worth it. I'm stacking up my crimsons and blues in case Jagex ever decides to do anything where we need more charms. Be that increase the XP cap, release some new familiars where I can make some money, like with the Ancient Invention familiars and all that sort of stuff. Now, this is the big kahuna of a tab. This is our loot tab. I'm not going to go over every item in here because that would take for absolute ever. But I just want to note some really big stacks. We have our Onyx Bolt stacks, which is 83,000, and they are about 8,000 each. So that's 650 mil there. We have our Tectonic Energies, which are 974. So that's about 1.2 bill right there. And then we have our Lantadimes, which are about 8,000 each, so that's over 100 mil there. The closest item to getting to a white stack is these magic logs, as I'm 700 away, and I imagine I'll get that very soon, and I'm very happy to have a white stack that I gained all by myself. Now, the archaeology tab is something I've been working on of late. Right now, I have 26 tetra compasses, but by the time Orphan comes out, I should get myself up to 30. I had originally said 50, but it took way too long to get that, so I just, I cut that down to 30 as I wanted to actually get some sleep this weekend. And then this is just a remnant of an old video. This was from the shapeshifter video. I just haven't gotten rid of it, so it's just a bunch of junk in here. And then the final tab is our invention tab, which has a couple extra gizmos left over. Like this is an Aftershock 4 Equilibrium 2 that I'm waiting to put on something, but I don't know what I'm going to put it on yet. Probably the offhand Kopesh when I get it. And then we have these XP capacitors, which fill up so quickly at archaeology. But yeah, that's it. That's my bank. Not much to it. Let's get into the price check. So it would take me about 3 hours to actually individually price check everything. So I'm just going to show you my wealth evaluator. So the wealth evaluator is telling me that I have 15.4 bill, though that number is a little high because there are a lot of untradeable items that actually can't be tradable, like corrupted ore. I think that 142k stack actually is worth 70 mil in the wealth evaluator because they're worth 5k each. So it counts some items wrong. But if we go to the tradable wealth, we have 5.7 bill in the bank and 5.9 mil in total. So we are making quite a pretty penny in terms of our bank value. When archaeology ended back in the middle of April, I had about a 5 bill bank. So in 6 months, I've gone up 10 bill. So I consider that a bit of a success, as that means I'm gaining about 50 mil a day. I plan on doing these types of videos every 6 months, I think, is a good time frame to see how my bank has changed. And then I can look back in the future and see the progress. But thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you like the content I'm creating, consider subscribing. But past that, have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one.